Like, oh, well, we don't ask those questions here.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous idea. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of collaboration and reflection as we seek to keep growing as teachers. So this podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name's Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
Abby and Dave, before we begin, I just want to mention to our listeners that we relish feedback. So if you're listening, please drop us a line, say hello, tell us where you are in the world, share any show ideas you might have or any notice or wonders about this podcast. And send that feedback to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Dave and Abby, we usually begin with a check-in question. So today's check-in question is I want you to think about the last week and looking back at it, what's something you are proud of in the last week? What is something that you are proud of? I will share mine while you're thinking about that. This past weekend, I had to drive about 600 miles. That's about 1,000 kilometers for our Canadian listeners to the North Dakota-Manitoba border and back within 24 hours to get a stamp in my passport. So I am really proud that I made that drive, that I got the stamp, and that I continue to work legally in the United States of America.
We'll take it.
That's something I'm proud of. I also never need to do that drive again for the rest of my life. So that's where I'll start. Abby, anything that comes to mind, something you're proud of in the last week?
It got nice out, so finally.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things in the spring is sprucing up my outside and my porch, planting some flowers. I got that done. I made myself a new address sign for my house, got that put up. So just my little entryway I'm feeling very proud of right now.
Nice.
Yeah, that's my good accomplishment.
The good weather is notable for our listeners because 3 weeks ago, we're recording this in early May. Yeah. It snowed still.
That's right.
So there is great rejoicing in the land. Literally. How about you, Dave? Something you're proud of in the last week?
I'm going to actually pick on my students. I've been working with grad students all semester. I'm so proud of the way they wrapped up their semester. I spent much of last week grading grad students' projects. They've been working on this for like the second half of the course. This has been like a 7-8 week project. Yeah. They killed it. It was just fantastic.
That's so fun.
Yeah, and to just see them, these are all practicing teachers literally around the globe. I've got a student in Nigeria, I've got a couple in Indonesia, and to just see the quality of the work that they're doing, localized to their particular context, but really, really high quality stuff. And I just love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Last week, Dave and Abby, we got an email from our friend and former professor, Jim Schaap.
That's right.
Jim was an advisor of mine many moons ago when I was an English secondary ed major. I still consider him a friend and a mentor.
Best teacher.
Yeah, he was an amazing human being, amazing professor. He's an excellent writer, and his writing often forces me to reflect on why I believe what I do. So Jim's writing makes me uncomfortable. And has caused some good trouble in my life, is what I would say. But Jim's email was quite short and to the point. Jim basically sent me an email with a link, and it said, I read this article. I know you have a podcast. I think you should discuss it. And the article is titled, Your Kids Can Handle Dangerous Ideas. And the author starts by sharing a story of his daughter asking him if she can skip school the next day. So as parents, they said no. But then the author, Matt Gross, says to his daughter, the next time you skip school, don't tell your parents. And he goes on to say, quote, isn't that the point of skipping school after all? To sneak around, to steal time and space back from the arbitrary system that enfolds you? To hell with permission. That's being a teenager, carving out a private life for yourself under the noses of authority figures who surround you. And then he goes on to say, when I look at the broader cultural landscape, I feel isolated in my permissiveness. Parents, or at least the parents who seem to win media attention, are freaking out over everything their kids see, read, and do. I'll say that last line again. Gross's last line is, parents, or at least the parents who seem to win media attention, are freaking out over everything their kids see, read, and do. So Dave and Abby, my question is really simple. Thanks, Jim, for sending. I think thanks.
I think so.
I think so. So Dave and Abby, is Matt Grossi author? Is he onto something here? I'm just curious what your initial reactions are, even to is he onto something here?
Yeah. I was so glad that you pulled that quote, because that was I think that's the key line in the whole article. Yeah. So I would encourage you to read it. We'll link it in the show notes, and we would encourage you to read the original. But that bit about the parents are freaking out over everything their kids see, read, and do, that just put a finger on the pulse of what I see. Right? Everyone is so anxious about their kids, and perhaps rightly so. But it just makes me wonder, how did we get here to this point where everyone is so anxious? Because then the kids are anxious because their parents are anxious. Yeah. So we're talking about that, right?
And I think fundamentally we have to recognize that permissiveness and protectiveness both have the same goal, right?
Yeah.
And there's a line in here. Question, right? Do you offer your kids broad exposure to the world and all its beauty and foulness and hope they make good decisions? Or do you try to protect them from ideas and activities that you see as dangerous or immoral and also hope they make good decisions, right? We're all trying to get to the same place.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is to raise good kids.
Right.
Right? Who make good decisions. And so what is the...
You had a good bit that I underlined here too, right? As long as my kids don't end up greedy, selfish, or the leader of fascist personality cult, we will be satisfied.
Right.
I thought,
But how much do you want them to be like you and protect them versus letting them explore the world and figure things out on their own?
That's right.
Which is better, right? And he also talks about like the crazes to ban books and to like he talks about the Disney Pixar turning red and the uproar that was about that. I watched it. I didn't really think it was that groundbreakingly new, right? I wrote what about Ferris Bueller? Right?
Oh my goodness,
If there was ever a movie about thumbing your nose at parental authority,
right.
What about all the movies I watched in the 80s, right? Why is this?
Yeah. So that's part of my question is sort of what happened. So my mom and dad listen faithfully to this podcast.
Hello.
Mom and dad.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hi, Mom and Dad. My mom and dad knew very little of what I did, even in elementary school. We would get on our bike and we'd leave for the day. We'd bike into this small town of Queensboro. We would do all kind of things that I don't even dare share because they're listening. And high school was often the same way. And I'm not suggesting kind of this nostalgic return to that. Although maybe I am, but I don't think I'm a return to let your kids go and do whatever they want. My question, it's just interesting to me that was my upbringing, and yet I parent exactly the opposite, right? And is it because of all those things I knew I was doing that my parents didn't know about? That is somehow I wanted, why do we want to control everything?
I think because we can, right? Technology is part of it, I think.
Yeah.
How many of us are keeping tabs through an app on where our kids are at?
I think it's possible in ways that it wasn't possible 30 years ago.
I think you're right about that.
But what are we scared of?
Yeah. Well,
that for me is a question.
Yeah, as a mother of young-ish children, right? I think part of it is I'm scared for their safety.
Yeah.
Right? I think about worst-case scenarios.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. But I also think part of it is, and I would be lying if I said this calculation doesn't go through my head, what are other people going to say if I let my kids blank?
Yeah.
That social pressure.
That social pressure, right? Especially for moms. Right? I think...
Can you talk about that especially for moms, Abby, just as a mom,
Right. Coming off of Mother's Day, right? And all of the complicated... emotions that surround the things that moms carry, that I think the emotional calculations that we also always have to do in our brains, right? Not only even if I trust my kid to do this, what is this mom gonna say? What does that say? What happens if someone finds out that I did this? Will there be right? As a working mom, as a there's all kinds of guilt that's already baked in.
Yeah.
It's just complicated,
Yeah.
and it's layered. And also, our choices are public in ways that they have not been in the past as well. Our individual parenting choices, right?
Yeah, it's like every decision we make is up for public consumption.
Yeah.
Everything is up for grabs. And I think then as parents, it just puts this pressure on. We better get it right.
Right.
Because if we don't, so that's the pressure I sometimes feel as a dad is we better get it right. Like the article says, hope they make good choices, right? We better get it right so they make good choices. But I also wonder is we better get it right, not just for our kids' sake, but because of how people are going to, how we believe people are going to view. What does this mean for me? How's this? Like in the end, it just feels like actually another form of almost narcissism. Like how it's actually about me as parents. Right. And that's for me is why, like I'll speak for myself, it can be hard to let go because what might it mean for me, not just for my kids, like, and I think that is really scary, right? And I think it's even around ideas, right? It's this, you know, like I sometimes you read, or if you're on Twitter, right, there's a video of somebody making a good choice, like a video of a young person helping someone cross the road or picking up garbage after a game. You just read through those responses, and one of the most predominant comments there is must have been raised by good parents, must have had good parents, must have had good parents, right? It's this assumption that if our kids are making good choices or engaging in good ideas or in staying safe, that somehow they must have had good parents. Well, with all due respect, we know that's not always true, right? And but I think we put that pressure on ourselves that you get one shot at this, and somehow our kids' choices, and this can be true, but it's not always true. They're not always a reflection
of our parenting. We did this, right? Have you guys seen on Netflix at all? Maybe advertised? There's a Japanese show called Old Enough. Have you seen it? Okay, so the basic idea of the show is preschoolers in Japan, like young kids, 3-5-year-old kids, their parents say, I need you to go to the market and get this. And then they send the kid out, like, on their own, and a camera crew following the kid through the city, and they go to the market, and sometimes they forget what they need to get, or it's cute, and it's funny. But it just has me thinking how some of our fears about how the kids are is so culturally derived too, right? Like, and like there's a part of me that's just aghast to think about, like, oh, but I would never send a preschool. Yeah, I live in a pretty safe town, and there's a lot of people who'd be looking out. If you saw a 4-year-old walking down the street, you'd be like, I'm going to go check in on that situation, right? And why am I so afraid of that idea? It prompts me to wonder some things about, like, is this just a cultural?
And how do we short circuit our kids' development if we don't give them opportunities? For my kids too, they thrive when I give them jobs to do, and I always tell them, I always frame it, we need you to be a functioning member of this household. Right? This is your responsibility. Here's my role, this is yours. Right? Gives them some ownership. In living there.
Right. And so maybe that's a part of that conversation too, when we're thinking about, you know, how are we parenting, how are we teaching young people today? Like, let's recognize that the way that we're doing it here in North America is not the only way.
Right. And it's not morally right.
No,
it's just culturally different.
That's right.
But it makes me think of the line, right? Lord of the Rings. It's a dangerous business going out the door, right?
That's right.
And it is, right? If we're not willing to take risks or engage dangerous ideas or send our kids to the store, like there is a risk. There's always a risk.
We're always
right?
taking a risk.
like it's interesting to me, you know, like we've talked about. You know, like what are we allowed to talk? You know, what do some school communities choose to talk about or not talk about? Like the hidden curriculum or the silent curriculum.
Right.
It's ironic to me that in some Christian school communities we don't want to have discussions about hard topics, and yet we put phones in the hands of teenagers.
That's right.
That we should be way more concerned about, that they're scrolling through and we have no idea, and we think we have ideas of what we may check their phones, And yet we know there's all kinds of ways
Have you
that
seen TikTok?
Yeah, all
right?
kinds of things that students. So I just even think there, like something does, like the audio and video do not line up.
Yeah.
Do not talk about this, with a teacher, a mentor in a classroom, but go to your room and look at your phone as long as you want, right? Like
There's a parenting
something.
lesson in there for me.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
something does not add up there. So I just think we need to rethink all of that.
Well, we should be asking the questions.
Yeah.
We should be asking the questions.
Absolutely.
The title of this piece really caught me, right? Like, your kids can handle dangerous ideas. And we're talking a lot about kind of the cultural moves that brought us to this place, but that had me really grappling a little bit, right? Like, we have fairly candid conversations with our kids around the supper table, and there is that fearful piece for me too. I so appreciate Abby just saying like about the situation, being a mom, and how that, and I'm not going to presume to
And I'm not
understand
saying
that
that dads
person.
don't feel the same pressure.
No, but I think it is different.
I'm
There's
not
different
trying to say
cultural
that.
expectations for
Yeah.
moms than for dads. But I still feel a sense of that when we have had conversations around potentially controversial topics,
Right.
and I'm always kind of like, but I sure hope my kids like represent this well, because
Right.
are people going to think weird things of me
Yeah.
because I'm willing to have a conversation
Or
with
maybe
my
ask
kids,
your teacher
right?
that question in this way instead
Right.
of in this way.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet, I want my kids,
want my kid asking the
kids
question.
to be able to
Yes.
ask that question. I
Yes.
want them to grapple with supposedly dangerous. And I guess that's the question I have behind this question. Okay, what makes these ideas dangerous?
Right.
Yeah.
Why can we have some topics that are hard to ask questions about or to wonder about? And like, because there's some cultural expectation, like, oh, well, we don't ask those questions here.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous idea.
And I think in Christian schools we have a unique opportunity to engage hard questions with our students.
We should have that
We
opportunity.
should have,
right?
right?
Yeah.
I think we do have. I don't know that people always take it for a variety of reasons.
That's right.
Much the same way that parents might feel pressure, I think teachers do,
Yeah.
right? How might what I say be
Totally.
misconstrued?
Yeah.
Be
What
totally
kind of
misrepresented.
social and public misrepresentation, shaming
Yeah.
might happen if I bring up this idea that could be controversial?
Well, I think in
And it
that
does happen.
totally, and I think in that sense, school communities, church communities, right? They plot a course, they decide this is the direction we're going, and then as teachers, you sort of have to abide by that. And I think there's this pressure that if somehow, even if done in good faith,
Right.
that word gets back, that somehow you've engaged a topic that a community has decided we're not going to engage that, or we've actually made decisions about that already.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're not somehow not supporting that decision, that comes off as being unsupportive of the Christian school, when in fact it actually could be exactly the opposite. Of actually, we want to have these discussions to help us reach Christ-centered biblical conclusions. And how can you do that without talking about it?
And how can your students take ownership of those decisions if the adults are always making them and never discussing them with the students,
Totally.
right?
That's right.
So there are all kinds of developmental theories, right? I teach ed psych, so I'm always thinking about students have to, so James Marcia has a whole theory on identity formation, and students need a crisis, right, in order to have a commitment. Otherwise, they're in foreclosure, and they don't have a deep commitment to the ideas. If someone tells them this is what you believe, and they never are given a chance to grapple with it or face any sort of wondering about that issue, they do not develop a deep commitment to it. Right? And so you're robbing them of that opportunity.
But you think you're doing the opposite.
But you think that you're leading them right, but you're really robbing them of the opportunity to come to that conclusion on their own. If you say this is what you believe and don't give them the opportunity to grapple with it.
And this has me wondering for Christian educators then, like, are we so fearful? Maybe the title should be like, teachers, you can handle dangerous, and parents, you can handle dangerous ideas. Like, we should be able to have conversations
and
about
trust everyone
things.
to still come to biblical conclusions.
That's right. And to be okay saying sometimes we're going to disagree about things, and
Right.
that doesn't mean that someone is evil because you disagree. Like that I think is the undercurrent that so often in Christian circles anyway I pick up. Like, well, if you disagree with me, then you're evil. Right?
But then I'd go a step further and I'd say school boards and school principals, your teachers can handle dangerous ideas.
That's
Do
right.
you trust your teachers to lead dangerous discussions around dangerous ideas. And if you don't, then maybe there's actually a bigger discussion that needs to happen.
Yeah.
It just strikes me, if I think about my own children in Christian education, one of among many, the reasons we sent our kids to Christian school, and one of the reasons we hoped that they would go to a Christian university, is because we wanted adults in their life having hard conversations with them. We did not send them to Christian school to not have those conversations.
Yeah.
We did not send them to Christian school to avoid having conversations. Like, right, I think about my own schooling growing up. We, in Canada, we never talked in our Christian school about some of the atrocities that First Nations people experience at the hands of the church. And I was young then. I don't know if that was a conscious decision or if that was just avoided. But I just think about how hard discussions about that would have helped me out, just deepen my understanding of fall and restoration and reconciliation and truth and to name hard things, and how does that empower you to name other hard things in your life, and deepen understanding of what does it mean to care and love your neighbor, to love mercy and act justly. And it's like, that's exactly what we should be talking about in Christian schools. And yet it seems like for some, they send their kids to Christian schools to avoid those conversations. So it feels like we're sort of almost at this crossroads in many Christian schools of saying, we're either going to engage these because that's what we should be doing, or we should avoid these because that's what we should be doing, so that our kids, quote unquote, turn out the right way. We still want the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So I just think it's like, what do we want to be on about as Christian schools?
I'm firmly in the camp of engaging the question.
Yeah.
Well, I am too.
Yeah.
And I think is it worth the potential fallout for me as a teacher, for me as a parent?
And how do you walk that line well?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where I so appreciate what you were saying there, Matt. Thinking about like different aspirations parents have for why, especially in Christian schools, why are you choosing to send your kid to a Christian school? Is it because you want to protect them from the world, or because you want to prepare them to engage the world? And I think those are two very different stances. And yet, most Christian schools probably have a combination of parents who have some combination of those.
And I don't know that they would consciously say, I want to protect them from the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's almost it's a learned behavior in some ways.
But part of it too, though, is if I think about young people, like, those hard questions exist for young people. They they are asking questions about sexuality. They are asking questions about race. They are asking questions about all these. That's what young people do, and God bless them for asking those hard questions.
Frankly, that's normal.
We should
normal
want them to. And again, that for me is if they can't ask those in our Christian communities, church, home, or school, they're going to ask them they're going to find the answer to those questions somewhere. So who do we want to partner with in helping them, not just give them the answer, but help them understand and discover the answer?
And wouldn't that be the ideal, right? For parents and churches and Christian schools to be working in concert together, recognizing we're all in this because we love kids and we want good for kids. And so we can we handle dangerous ideas in that kind of a context? Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah. And yet I think there's a lot of fearful people who don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, sometimes it makes me just wonder if we do, in the end, we don't give our teachers and our students enough credit for their ability to have those honest discussions. Yeah. And in the end, maybe then does it come down to trust? Can we trust our teachers and students to have those discussions without micromanaging every little piece of it? Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for joining us today for another hallway conversation. Whether it is this day, this week, this month, or this school year, we hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of to end well. And as you go into this day, we send you with this blessing. God go before you to lead you. God go behind you to protect you. God go beneath you to support you. God go beside you to befriend you. Do not be afraid. May the blessing of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be upon you. Do not be afraid. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Amen. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good week.
This podcast was quite literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is an independent podcast created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Thanks for listening.
I also just want to confess at the end of this, I did skip school quite a bit when I was in high school. My parents did not know about it. Mom and Dad, just so you know, we stopped at the Tim Hortons in uptown New Westminster, and we always missed our first period
Everyone will be shocked to know that I did not.
Yeah, in a shock.
This is my colleagues right here in a nutshell.
I did one time.
You really?
One time we left for lunch.
Wow, true.
So not class.
True confessions
Lunch.
of the teenage soul.